Don't scroll yet. I have spent years in the Forgotten Realms, not as a hero, but asking one question. What would it actually feel like to live there? Could you walk from Baldursgate to Waterdeep and survive as a beggar? That is what this series is. Ordinary lives in a world that was not built for them. The weight of rent, the gods who do not care, the rules you cannot break. Every detail verified against canon. If something is wrong, tell me. If all is good, then enjoy. Let us begin. You wake in a rented room above a chandler's shop near the Grey Harbour docks, and this is the daily life of a Bhaal assassin in Baldursgate, where survival is counted in 10 days and belief is measured in blood. The room smells of tallow and rendered fat from the workshop below, and the single window opens onto a sloped roof that connects to the buildings on either side. And from where you stand, you can see the masts in Grey Harbour and the torches burning along the warehouse row near Flim's Cargo. The bed is narrow and the blanket is thin, and the door has 3 locks that you installed yourself after the night you woke to footsteps on the stairs that stopped outside your door and did not continue. The landlord asked no questions when you paid 6 months ahead in coin that clinked too heavy for the work you claimed. You rise before the light reaches the stones of Grey Harbour, and you rinse your face in the basin, and you dress in the clothes of a shipping clerk, because that is what the neighbours believe you are, and you eat bread and hard cheese standing at the window, because sitting feels like waiting, and waiting feels like weakness. The 10-day is the measure of your usefulness and the currency of your survival, because every servant of the Lord of Murder must complete 1 kill every 10 days without exception, and if you miss the count, then you owe 2 lives for every one you fail to take, and the debt compounds, and the deadline shortens, and the cell notices before the temples ever do. You have 7 days remaining before your next kill is due, and the weight of that deadline settles over you like the tallow smoke that seeps through the floorboards from below. Your cover identity is a shipping clerk for a merchant house that moves grain from the Kiantar upriver barges to the sea vessels in Grey Harbour, and the work is real, and the ledgers are real, and the other clerks believe you are quiet and diligent and forgettable, and that is the point. The daytime belongs to the cover, because suspicion grows in the gaps where explanations should be, and the assassin who cannot explain their daylight hours is the assassin who draws the attention of the flaming fist before they ever reach a target. You walk to work through the waking streets of the lower city, past the Elfsong Tavern, where the ghostly voice has been singing since before you were born, past the Blushing Mermaid where the dockhands gather for cheap ale and cheaper rumours, past the stalls where fish and vegetables are laid out on tables still wet from the morning delivery. And you notice everything because noticing is breathing, and breathing is living, and living is killing. The merchant house sits near Flim's Cargo on the harbour front, and the office smells of ink and dust, and the particular staleness of ledgers that have absorbed decades of salt air. And you take your seat at the desk by the window, and you begin the work that maintains the cover and the unremarkable life that no one questions. The other clerks arrive and nod and settle into their own desks, and the day unfolds in columns of numbers and manifests, and the endless accounting of grain that moves from river to sea and feeds a city that does not know how close it sleeps to those who serve the god of murder. The work occupies your hands but not your mind, and while your fingers trace the inventory of barley and wheat, your thoughts trace the inventory of potential targets, the rhythms of the lower city that you have learned like a second language spoken only in your skull. You know which streets empty after dark and which remain busy until the small hours. You know which taverns host travellers who will not be missed, and which host regulars whose absence would be noticed before dawn. You know which alleys lead to dead ends, and which lead to sewers, and which lead to the harbour where a body weighted properly will never surface. This knowledge is not written anywhere. It lives only in the repetition of walking and watching and remembering, and it is worth more than the coin in your hidden pouch. Because coin can be replaced, but knowledge must be earned again with every new city and every new cover and every new 10-day. Midday arrives and you eat alone at your desk because the other clerks walk to the Blushing Mermaid for ale and whatever the kitchen is serving, and you have declined their invitations so many times that they have stopped offering, and the solitude is worth the slight suspicion because the alternative is hours of conversation, where a single wrong word could unravel years of careful construction. The bread today is darker than yesterday, bought from a different baker because you never visit the same shop twice in a row if you can help it. And the cheese is sharper because the vendor at the Bloomridge Park Market changes her stock on a 3-day cycle that you have tracked without meaning to, because tracking is what you do, and patterns are what you see, and seeing is what keeps you alive. The afternoon stretches toward evening, and the light through the salt-stained windows turns golden, and then amber, and then the grey of approaching dusk, and you feel the familiar pull toward prayer that rises with the dying of the light. The work slows, and the other clerks gather their things and leave in ones and twos, and you remain at your desk with a ledger open until the last footsteps fade down the stairs, and then you close the book and bow your head and whisper the words that have shaped every evening since you first tasted blood in service to the God who embraces all who deal in death. You pray at dusk because dusk is the threshold between the world of light, where ordinary people conduct their ordinary lives, and the world of darkness, where the true work begins. And the prayer is not a request, but a promise, not a supplication, but a statement. And the words you speak are old and simple and terrible in their simplicity. You give thanks for another day closer to the kill that will reset the count and prove your worth. The prayer ends, and you rise, and you gather your things, and you walk home through streets that have transformed with the fading light. The same stones and buildings and faces now rearranged into the architecture of possibility. Every shadow, a potential site. Every solitary figure, a potential target. Every quiet corner, a potential gift from the God who rewards those who see what others refuse to notice. The chandler's shop is dark when you return, the owner having closed for the evening, and you climb the stairs to your room and you light the single candle that you allow yourself, and you begin the real work of the evening. The research is methodical and patient and takes as many hours as it needs because a botched kill is worse than no kill at all, worse because it draws attention, worse because it wastes the opportunity, worse because the cell remembers failures longer than it remembers successes. You have been watching a particular target for 3 days now, a travelling merchant who arrived by barge from Elturel and took a room at the Blushing Mermaid, where the clientele is transient and Captain Grizzly asks no questions, and the shadows are deep enough to hide 100 sins. The merchant is perfect because he is alone and unknown and will not be missed until his ship sails without him, and by then the harbour will have swallowed whatever remained of his presence. He drinks until his words slur and his steps wobble, and he stumbles out the back to piss in the alley every night because he is too drunk to find the privy. And the alley behind the Blushing Mermaid is dark, and the night soil collectors do not visit until after midnight. You have walked this alley at every hour of the night, counting paces, noting sight lines, identifying the one brick in the wall that is loose enough to serve as a step if you need to climb. And the preparation is as much a part of the devotion as the kill itself, because Bhaal rewards those who approach murder as craft rather than chaos. You review your tools in the candlelight. The blade that has no ornament because ornament is vanity and vanity is evidence, the thin cord that coils easily in the pocket, the vial of sleeping draught that you have never needed but carry anyway because the prepared servant is the surviving servant. The blade is clean because you clean it after every use, the motion as automatic as breathing, the ritual as important as the prayer. You test the edge against your thumb and feel the familiar sting that confirms the sharpness, and you wrap the blade in oiled cloth and tuck it inside your coat, where it rests against your ribs like a second heartbeat. The night is young and the kill is not tonight, because you have 3 more days of watching before you are certain. 3 more days to learn whether the merchant ever varies his routine, whether he ever leaves with a companion, whether the back alley has another exit that might complicate the return to darkness after the deed is done. Patience is not a virtue in the Church of Bhaal, but a requirement, because the god of murder does not reward enthusiasm, but success, and success comes to those who wait until waiting becomes redundant. You sleep in your clothes with the blade beneath your pillow because the 3 locks are good, but no lock is perfect. And the guild does not forget those who hunt in their territory without permission, and the fist does not stop looking once they start. You wake often and lightly because that is how you learn to survive. The dreams, when they come, are dark and formless and full of faces that you will never see again, and you wake from them grateful rather than disturbed, because the dreams mean that the god is watching, and that is enough. The morning arrives and you rise and you splash water on your face, and you dress for the shipping clerk's life, and you eat bread that is today brown with seeds, and cheese that is today pale and mild, and you walk to work through streets that have transformed back into their daylight arrangement, innocent and ordinary and utterly unlike the territory you mapped in darkness. The count stands at 6 days now, and the weight has not lifted, but it has not grown, and you perform the work of columns and manifest with the same diligence as yesterday, because the cover must be maintained, especially when the kill is close, because confidence is the assassin's enemy, and routine is the assassin's friend. The days blur and repeat, and each evening you pray at dusk, and each night you walk the lower city with eyes that see what others refuse to notice, and you watch the merchant drink and stumble out the back to the same dark corner of the alley, and you confirm again and again that he is alone and unknown and perfect. The count falls to 5 days and then to 4, and on the 4th day something changes. You are sitting in your usual corner of the Blushing Mermaid, with the ale untouched before you, when the door opens and 2 flaming fist soldiers walk in. Not a patrol and not an investigation, but 2 off-duty men looking for drink after a long shift. They take seats at the bar 3 stools down from the merchant, and you watch with the stillness of a man who knows that stillness is survival. The soldiers order wine and begin talking loudly about a brawl they broke up near the basilisk gate, and the merchant turns on his stool and joins their conversation because he is drunk and lonely and desperate for any human connection. You watch him buy them around. You watch them laugh at something he says. You watch one of the soldiers clap him on the shoulder like an old friend, and you understand in that moment that your perfect target has just become imperfect, that these 2 men will remember his face and his voice and his generosity, that if he dies tonight, there will be witnesses who can describe the last person they saw him talking to, the quiet man in the corner who nursed a single ale and watched the door. The count stands at 4 days. You have time to find another target, time to start over, time to be patient. But patience now means abandoning 3 days of preparation, 3 days of walking and watching and learning, 3 days that cannot be recovered. The merchant is still perfect in every way except this new connection, this brief friendship that has contaminated the kill with the possibility of memory. You make the decision before you finish thinking it through. Tonight. It has to be tonight, before he sees the soldiers again, before the friendship deepens, before his face becomes fixed in their minds. The preparation is incomplete, the route not fully confirmed, the timing rushed, but the alternative is worse. The alternative is starting over with 4 days remaining and the weight already pressing down. The merchant drinks until his head droops, and he pushes himself off the stool and staggers toward the back, and you leave coin on the table and slip out a side entrance to reach the alley first. The soldiers remain at the bar, their backs to the room, their attention on each other and the wine they are drinking, and you feel the night close around you like a familiar garment as you step into the darkness. The alley is not as empty as you expected. A figure leans against the wall, smoking something that glows orange in the darkness, and you have to adjust your route, circling wide through a passage you have not fully mapped, trusting your knowledge of the district to guide you back to the merchant before he finishes and returns inside. The detour costs you 30 paces, and when you emerge into the alley behind the Blushing Mermaid, the merchant is already there, fumbling with his trouser laces against the wall, too drunk to notice the shadow that has materialized behind him. The kill is faster than you intended, messier in execution, though not in result, the blade finding its mark before the words are fully spoken, the body sagging against the wall before you can lower it properly to the stones. You speak the words anyway, completing the ritual even as the blood pools faster than it should, even as the drunk in the side passage finishes his pipe and begins walking toward the street. The day's farewell is rushed, your hands barely wet before you are moving, slipping into shadows that lead away from the body, and away from the smoker, and away from the tavern where 2 flaming fist soldiers are still drinking wine and talking about a merchant from Elturel who seemed like a decent fellow. You take a route home that you have never taken before, through alleys you have not mapped, past doorways you have not studied, and you feel the wrongness of it in your bones, the deviation from craft that the god tolerates but does not reward. The walk home is not lighter. The weight of the countdown has lifted, but a different weight has settled in its place. The weight of a kill that was not clean, not perfect, not the offering you intended to make. The god accepts what is given, but you know the difference between a gift and a payment, between devotion and obligation, between art and survival. You climb the stairs to your room and you light the single candle, and you scrub your hands in the basin until the water turns pink and then red, and then you pour it out the window into the alley below. The blade needs cleaning, but you clean it now, immediately, because the ritual must be completed, even when the execution was flawed. You lie down in your clothes with the blade beneath your pillow, and you close your eyes, and you feel something that is not peace, not relief, but something more complicated. The satisfaction of a deadline met mixed with the knowledge that you could have done better if the world had not intervened. Sleep comes eventually, and the dreams when they come are formless and distant and full of the merchant's face, which is already fading into the crowd of faces that you will never see again. The morning arrives and you wake, and the first thing you feel is the absence of the weight that pressed down for the last 7 days. The lightness of a servant who has fulfilled their obligation and purchased another 10-day of belonging. You rise, and you splash cold water on your face, and you dress for the shipping clerk's life, and you eat bread that is today white with a soft crust, and you walk to work through streets that look different this morning, brighter somehow, more forgiving, as if the world has shifted slightly to accommodate your passage. The merchant house is the same as always, the dust and ink and salt air, the other clerks at their desks, the ledgers waiting to be filled with columns of numbers that mean nothing to you except the continuation of a cover that has served you well. You take your seat and you begin the work, and you feel something that might be satisfaction settling over you. The contentment of a craftsman who has done their craft adequately, if not well. The peace of a servant who knows their place in an order larger than themselves. The days ahead will bring more watching, more walking, more mapping of streets and alleys, and the routines of strangers who do not know they are being studied. The 10-day will pass in its familiar rhythm of cover work and evening prayer and nighttime observation. And at some point, the weight will begin to build again. The countdown will begin to press. And you will find yourself once more in a dark alley with a blade and words and an offering for a god who never stops being hungry. This is what it is to serve the Lord of Murder in Baldursgate. Not the glory of the stories, not the power of the legends, but the daily weight of belonging to something that owns you entirely. The constant negotiation between the life that conceals and the life that kills. The endless repetition of watching and waiting, and finally doing what you were made to do in the darkness that welcomes you home. You have 9 days remaining before your next kill is due, and the count has already begun. The routine that follows the kill is its own kind of ritual, not sacred, but necessary. The 1,000 small adjustments that keep the cover intact, and the suspicion absent, and the next 10-day unfolding like all the 10 days before it. You return to the merchant house each morning and perform the work of ledgers and manifests. You eat your bread and cheese at your desk while the other clerks walk to the Blushing Mermaid. You pray at dusk and walk the streets at night with eyes that never stop watching, even when there is nothing specific to watch. The news of the body reaches the merchant house on the 3rd day after the kill. Gossip filtering through the clerks like water through sand. The story already distorted into something that bears little resemblance to what actually happened. A merchant from Elturel, they say, killed in an alley near the docks, throat cut by robbers who took his purse and left him to bleed out on the stones. The story is wrong in every particular, except the essential truth of the death. And the wrongness is a kind of protection, a gift from circumstances that conspire to keep you invisible. You listen without reacting, because any reaction invites attention, and attention is the end of everything you have built. The other clerks shake their heads and cluck their tongues and return to their work, the death already fading into the endless catalogue of deaths that punctuate life in any city large enough to have shadows worth hiding in. The merchant will be mourned somewhere, in El Turel perhaps, by people who expected him to return on a ship that sailed without him. But here in the lower city, he is already becoming a story that will be forgotten by those who tell it. A cautionary tale about drinking alone in dangerous neighborhoods. A nothing that was once a someone. The cell meets once a month in a place that changes with each meeting. The location passed through channels that leave no trace. The gathering conducted in darkness and robes that hide faces and voices trained to reveal nothing. You have attended 3 such meetings since you came to this city, kneeling among brothers and sisters whose names and faces you will never know, whose kills you will hear praised or critiqued, without ever learning who performed them. Once a year, the cell gathers for the Feast of the Moon, the one fixed date on the calendar of the church, and those who have attended speak of it in whispers that suggest something larger than the monthly meetings, a ritual involving the steel sarcophagus and a reward called Bhaal's Rest that you have never witnessed. The safe house shifts through a network of basements and back rooms and abandoned properties that the church maintains through arrangements you do not need to know. When the skull and teardrops appear scratched into the stone near the Elfsong Tavern, you dress in the clothes stored for this purpose and walk through the night to wherever the meeting is being held. The last meeting was in a cellar beneath Candulhallow's Tombstones in the Heapside district, the shop where mourners buy memorial stones without knowing what waits below. A brother led you past the counter to a painting on the back wall. He pressed a button that was hidden in the frame and the wall swung open onto stairs that smelled of earth and something older, like incense and blood, and the scent of devotion that clings to places where the god has been invited. The room below was lit by candles set in sconces shaped like hands, and the brothers and sisters knelt in a circle around an altar where the steel sarcophagus rested, its lid carved with the holy symbol of the Lord of Murder. The priest of Bhaal spoke words that you had heard before and would hear again. The catechism of the church that binds all servants regardless of rank or city or circumstance, and the assembled faithful responded in voices trained to speak in unison, without revealing whose voice was whose. The prayers were followed by the telling of kills, each servant describing their offerings without revealing their identities, the accomplishments praised and the failures analyzed, and the lessons extracted for all to learn. That night you heard a brother describe a kill that had gone wrong, a target who fought back harder than expected, and a blade that slipped, and a scream that brought witnesses before the work could be completed. The brother had escaped barely, and the kill had been finished by a second brother who happened to be nearby, but the failure was a failure nonetheless. The priest's critique was precise and terrible, and delivered in a voice that held no anger, because anger implies investment, and the god does not invest in failure, but merely notes it and moves on. You remember thinking as you knelt in the darkness listening to the catalogue of kills and failures, that this is what belief looks like when it is stripped of comfort, when it is reduced to its essential elements of obligation and consequence, and the endless renewal of the 10-day. The god does not love you and does not care whether you live or die. The god only cares that death continues to flow through the channels that his servants dig, and if you stop digging, then you stop mattering, and the god's attention turns to those who continue. The meeting ended, as it always ends, with the day's farewell performed as a group, all the brothers and sisters dipping their hands in a basin of blood that had been prepared for this purpose, the mingled blood of offerings made throughout the month, combining into something that smelled like copper and salt and forever. You dried your hands on a cloth provided by a figure whose face you could not see, and you filed out through the hidden door into the tombstone shop above. And you walked home through streets that felt different than they had before, charged somehow, electric with the knowledge that you had stood in the presence of the divine and survived. The next meeting will come when the symbol appears, and until then you continue alone, walking and watching and counting down toward the kill that will prove you worthy of another 10-day of belonging. The pressure begins to build around the 5th day, the familiar tightening that signals the approach of the deadline. the weight that settles back onto your shoulders like an old coat that you never really took off. You have identified 3 potential targets this 10-day: travelers and strangers, and the occasional lower city resident whose routines suggest isolation, whose circumstances suggest opportunity, whose deaths suggest the particular anonymity that the god prefers. The target you choose is a woman who works as a laundress in a building near the counting house, a widow who lives alone and walks home late after delivering linens to the wealthy households that employ her services. She is perfect in all the ways that matter, alone and unremarkable, and following a routine that takes her through a stretch of street where the light does not reach and the buildings press close, and the sound of a scream would be swallowed by stone before it reached anyone who cared to investigate. You watch her for 3 days, learning her patterns, confirming her isolation, mapping the route she takes from the laundry to her room in a tenement that overlooks the harbour. She is old enough that no one will wonder at her death, weary enough that no one will suspect violence, poor enough that her absence will be noticed only when the linens stop arriving at the houses that depend on her work. The kill is set for the 6th day, and you prepare the way you always prepare by reviewing tools and walking the route and confirming the shadows. But on the 6th day, as you follow her through the familiar streets, she turns down a different alley, cutting behind the Water Queen's house, where the fishermen leave offerings to Umberlee. You stop at the corner suddenly exposed, because the new route passes a doorway where 2 men stand smoking and talking in voices loud enough to carry. The laundress walks past them without acknowledgement and continues toward her tenement, and you stand frozen in the darkness, weighing the options that have suddenly narrowed to 2: abandon or adapt. You abandon. The risk is too great, and the witnesses too present, and the 10-day still has days remaining before the debt compounds. You walk home through streets that feel heavier than they did an hour ago, the weight of the failed attempt adding to the weight of the approaching deadline. And you lie awake in your narrow bed calculating how many days you have left to find another opportunity, another target, another shadow that will welcome the work. The next night you return to the laundress's route, but she has changed it permanently, and the new path takes her through streets that are too well lit and too well traveled for the kind of work that requires darkness and silence and the absence of eyes. You have lost her, and the loss costs you 2 days of watching that cannot be recovered. 2 days that compress the remaining time into something that feels less like a deadline and more like a trap. On the 8th day, you find a new target, a dock worker who drinks alone at a tavern near the Grey Harbour Fish Market, and who takes a route home through the warehouse district, where the night soil collectors never go. He is alone and unknown and available in all the ways the laundress was before she changed her path. You have 2 days to watch him and confirm his patterns and prepare an offering that will satisfy the god and purchase another 10-day of survival. The kill comes on the 9th day in the darkness between warehouses that smell of fish and salt, and it is faster than you prefer and less careful than you like. But the blade finds its mark and the words are spoken, and the body sags against the stones the way all bodies sag when the life leaves them. Then the footsteps. A drunk stumbles into the mouth of the alley, silhouetted against the lamplight of the street beyond, and he stops when he sees the shape on the ground, the shape that is too still to be sleeping and gleams wet in the faint light. He opens his mouth and you are already moving, not toward him but away, through the passage at the back of the alley that leads to a courtyard, that leads to a street that leads to somewhere that is not here. Behind you, the drunk begins to shout, a wordless sound of alarm that will bring the fist and questions you cannot answer. You do not run. Running draws attention. You walk steadily and purposefully, through streets that feel hostile now, through darkness that no longer feels like shelter. The drunk saw something, a shape, a movement, maybe a face or maybe just a shadow or maybe nothing that will survive the wine and the shock and the morning. You do not know, and you cannot know, and the not knowing is worse than any certainty. You walk home through routes you have never taken, doubling back twice to confirm you are not followed, and you climb the stairs to your room above the chandler's shop, and you lock all 3 locks, and you do not light the candle, because light is visibility, and visibility is death. You sit in the darkness with the blade across your knees, and you listen to the city sounds outside your window, and you wait for the knock that does not come, Sleep does not come either. You sit through the night and into the grey morning, and when the light is strong enough to move by, you dress for the shipping clerk's life and walk to work through streets that look the same as they always look, but feel entirely different, charged with a danger that may be real or imagined, but cannot be dismissed. The symbol does not appear that week. The wall near the Elfsong Tavern remains bare and the signal absent, and the cell silent. You walk past the spot each evening on your way home from the merchant house, and each evening the stones show nothing, and the absence presses harder than any presence could. A week becomes 2, becomes 3. The 10-day comes and goes, and you make your kills alone, without validation or communion, or any confirmation that you are still part of something larger than yourself. The kills are clean now, and careful, the lesson of the drunk in the alley carved into every preparation and approach, every moment of waiting before the blade finds its mark. But the cleanness brings no satisfaction, only the hollow completion of an obligation that no one is watching. You do not know what the silence means, whether the drunk saw your face or the fist has your description, or the church has simply decided you are no longer worth the risk. The not knowing is its own kind of death, slower than a blade, but just as final. The kills continue. The 10-day does not pause for doubt, and the count does not wait for confirmation. You wake each morning in the room above the chandler's shop and dress for the shipping clerk's life, and walk to work through streets that might contain watchers or nothing at all, and you clean your blade and pray at dusk and wait for a signal that does not come. 3 weeks after the drunk in the alley, the skull and teardrops appear. The pattern is the same as it has always been. The angles and curves that mean nothing to anyone who has not been taught to read them, and you feel something loosen in your chest when you see them. A tightness that has been clenched for 21 days, finally releasing. The meeting is tomorrow, and the cell still exists, and you have not been abandoned. The safe house is in a new location, a basement beneath a chandler's shop in the Eastway district, and you note the irony without finding it amusing. The one who leads speaks the words that open the ritual, and the prayers are followed by the telling of kills. And no one mentions the silence or the 3 weeks that passed without communion, because the church does not explain itself to its servants. You kneel among the hooded figures whose faces you cannot see, and you understand that this is what it means to belong to something that owns you entirely, that the silence was a reminder of what it feels like to serve alone. The meeting ends, and you file out through the hidden door, and you walk home through streets that feel different than they did 3 weeks ago. Not charged with danger, but heavy with the understanding that the church can withdraw at any moment, and the silence can return whenever it decides it should. The rhythm resumes, and the 10 days pass, and the seasons change in the lower city, the way seasons change everywhere, slowly and then suddenly, the warmth of summer giving way to the first cold edges of autumn, and the rain that falls almost daily during the harvest months, turning the streets to mud and the alleyways to rivers, and the work of watching into something more difficult than it was before. You learn to account for weather the way you account for patrol routes and tavern schedules, the rain that covers sound but reveals footprints, and the fog that obscures everything, and the cold that leaves the streets empty at hours that would otherwise offer crowds for cover. The autumn brings changes to the merchant house as well. The grain shipments slowing as the harvest completes, and the river barges begin to make their last runs before the ice forms upriver near El Turel. The other clerks speak of the winter slowdown with a particular mix of relief and dread. Relief at the lighter workload and dread at the reduced wages that accompany it, and you listen to their conversations the way you listen to all conversations, extracting the useful and discarding the rest. The cover must be maintained through the slow season as surely as through the busy season. The appearance of the shipping clerk, who cannot afford to lose this position when the harbour fills with ice and the ships stop sailing. The kills continue through the autumn and into the winter, the 10-day rhythm unbroken by weather or season, or the changing patterns of a city that contracts against the cold. You find that winter targets are easier in some ways. because the cold drives people to routine and routine is vulnerability, but harder because it also drives them indoors where witnesses wait. The alleyways that served in summer become treacherous in winter. The cobblestones slick with ice and the shadows deeper. But the cold making you clumsy if you wait too long, and you learn to adjust the way you have learned to adjust to everything, through repetition and mistake, and the slow accumulation of knowledge that keeps you alive. The winter solstice passes, and the new year arrives, and you mark neither, because the only calendar that matters is the 10-day, and the only count that matters is the days remaining before the next kill is due. The months blur into each other the way the kills blur into each other, each one similar enough to the last that the differences are technical rather than essential. The color of the hair, the sound of the voice in the moment before silence, the particular weight of a body going slack against the stones. You attend another meeting in a basement beneath a building in the Eastway district near the Basilisk Gate. The safe house accessed through a door that appeared to be bricked shut until a brother in robes pushed a hidden lever and the bricks swung inward on hinges that made no sound. The meeting follows the pattern you have come to expect. The prayers and the praise and the critique, and the communal day's farewell, with hands dipped in blood that carries the devotion of 100 offerings. The one who leads speaks of a threat that has emerged, flaming fist investigators who have noticed a pattern in the deaths that cluster near the Grey Harbour docks, and the instruction is to shift hunting grounds for the next several 10 days, to spread the kills across districts that have not yet drawn attention. You absorb this instruction the way you absorb all instructions, without question or comment, or any indication that you have understood, except the slight nod that protocol requires. The shift in hunting grounds means learning new streets and shadows and rhythms, the work of weeks compressed into days because the 10-day does not pause for learning, and the count does not wait for preparation. You leave the meeting through a different door than the one you entered, emerging into an alley that connects to the lower city central district, and you walk home through territory that feels both familiar and foreign, known in its broad strokes, but unknown in the particular details that make the difference between survival and exposure. The next 10-day you hunt in the Bloomridge district, uphill from your usual territory, the streets wider and the houses finer, and the people who walk them less accustomed to the dangers that the lower city takes for granted. The target you choose is a servant who works in one of the wealthy homes that line the park, a man who walks down to a tavern called the Splurging Sturgeon every evening to drink far from the eyes of those he serves, and who takes a route through alleys that he believes are safe, because they are far from the docks where everyone knows the murders happen. The kill is clean and spoken over and left in a shadow that the morning will discover, and you walk home through the lower city, feeling more exposed than usual, more watched, even though the watching is your imagination, and the exposure is your fear, and the truth is that no one notices the servant of murder who walks among them with the victim's blood still beneath the fingernails. The skull and teardrops appear in autumn, earlier than expected, and the pattern is different than it has ever been. Additional scratches that you have been taught but never seen. The marks that indicate not a monthly meeting, but something urgent that requires attendance without delay. The safe house is beneath Candulhallow's tombstones again, and when you descend the stairs, you find the one who leads waiting with only 3 other brothers, the room too empty, and the silence too heavy, and the candles casting shadows that seem to move when nothing is moving. He speaks without preamble or ritual or any of the forms that usually shape these gatherings. A directed kill, not a 10-day offering, but a target selected by the church for reasons that are not explained. The name is spoken, and you hear it, and you feel something shift in your chest, because you know this name. You have heard it every day for 2 years. You have sat 3 desks away from it in the merchant house near Flim's Cargo. Aldrich, the quiet clerk who arrives early and leaves before dusk, who once asked if you were feeling well when you seemed distracted, who brings honey cakes on feast days and leaves them on the corner of your desk without comment. The one whose face you have studied without meaning to, and whose routines you have learned without trying, and whose life has intersected with yours in 1,000 small ways that you never thought would matter. The one who leads does not explain why Aldrich must die. The church does not justify its selections. What you are told is that the kill must be clean and untraceable and happen before the Feast of the Moon, which is 10 days away. What you are not told is how to return to work after, how to sit at your desk, knowing the empty chair 3 rows over, how to listen to the other clerks wonder what happened to quiet Aldrich, who always arrived early and left before dusk. You walk home through the lower city, feeling something you cannot name. Not danger, not hostility, but wrongness. The god demands death in darkness, and you have given death in darkness more times than you can count. But this death has a face you know, and a voice you have heard, and a presence you have shared space with for 2 years of ordinary days that are about to end. The 10 days pass, and you watch Aldrich the way you have watched 100 targets, learning his patterns, confirming his isolation, mapping the route he takes from the merchant house to his room in a tenement near the sea tower. He is perfect in all the ways that matter, alone and unremarkable, and following a routine that takes him through shadows you have mapped and darkness that will welcome the work. And you wish you did not have to kill him. The kill comes on the evening before the Feast of the Moon, in an alley behind a bakery that Aldrich passes every night on his way home from work. You wait in the shadow of a doorway with the blade already in your hand and the words already forming in your throat. And when he passes, you step out, and your hand finds his mouth, and your blade finds his throat, and the words are spoken before he can make a sound. His eyes meet yours in the moment before the light leaves them, and you see recognition there, not fear, but something else. Something that might be understanding or confusion, or the particular peace that comes from dying at the hands of someone you trusted. He does not struggle. He sags against you, and you lower him to the stones, and you clean your hands in his blood, and you perform the day's farewell over a body that you will see in your dreams. The walk home is not lighter, and the weight has not lifted. You climb the stairs to your room, and you lock all 3 locks, and you scrub your hands in the basin until the skin is raw, and the water is red, and the candle has burned down to a stub. You sit in the darkness with the blade across your knees, and you wait for the dawn that will bring you back to the merchant house, back to the desk by the window, back to the ledgers and manifests and the empty chair 3 rows over. The morning arrives, and you dress for the shipping clerk's life, and you walk to work through streets that look the same as they always look, and you take your seat at your desk, and you open a ledger, and you begin the work that has not changed, that will never change, that continues whether or not Aldrich is there to continue it with you. The other clerks notice his absence by mid-morning. Someone mentions that Aldrich is never late. Someone else suggests he might be ill. By afternoon, the questions have turned to concern, and by evening to worry, and when you leave the merchant house at dusk, you walk past the alley where you killed him, and you see nothing, no body, no blood, no evidence that anything happened there at all. The Feast of the Moon arrives that night, the one fixed date on the calendar of the church, the night when all servants of Bhaal gather to praise and discuss and remember. The meeting is larger than the monthly gatherings, held in the temple of Bhaal beneath the city, and you kneel among brothers and sisters in robes of purple and black with violet streaks, and you listen to the stories of kills that are praised for artistry and elegance and the capacity to inspire fear. When your turn comes, you speak briefly of a kill that felt like nothing at the time, a clerk taken in an alley behind a bakery, the body positioned to suggest robbery, the flaming fist report that will conclude random violence rather than directed murder. The praise you receive is warmer than before, more substantial. The acknowledgement that you have proven yourself capable of sacrifice beyond the physical act of killing. The feast ends with the ritual the brothers had whispered about, the high priest leading a procession to the steel sarcophagus at the far end of the vault. The one judged to have made the greatest kill of the year is invited forward. And it is not you. It is someone whose voice you do not recognize, whose kill you heard described earlier, a merchant murdered in his bed while his wife slept beside him. The sarcophagus is filled with blood, and the brother descends, and the lid is closed and the chant begins, and you speak the words that rise from somewhere deeper than memory. The brother emerges stained red, his eyes distant, his face carrying something that might be rapture or terror, or the particular peace that comes from having been touched by something larger than yourself. You watch him dress in fresh robes and you understand that this is what the church calls Bhaal's rest. The reward for the servant who has proven themselves worthy of direct communion with the God who demands death in darkness. You wonder, as you walk home through streets that are still dark despite the hour, whether you will ever lie in that sarcophagus, whether your kills will ever rise to the level of artistry that warrants such an honor. The wondering is not ambition exactly, because ambition implies desire, and desire implies choice, but it is something, a flicker that might become hunger if you let it, a spark that might become fire if you feed it. You return to your room above the chandler's shop, and you scrub your hands clean, and you sleep in your clothes with the blade beneath your pillow. And when you wake, the feast is already fading into memory, becoming another story in the endless catalogue of stories that shape your understanding of what it means to serve. That morning you walk to work through streets that look the same as always, and you take your seat at your desk by the window, and you open a ledger that needs filling. The other clerks are talking about Aldrich. They found his body yesterday, they say, in an alley near the bakery he always passed. Robbed and killed, the fist concluded, another victim of the lower city's endless hunger for blood. Someone mentions the honey cakes he used to bring. Someone else says they always thought he seemed lonely. You listen without reacting, because any reaction invites attention, and attention is the end of everything you have built. The work continues. Ledgers filled, manifests checked, grain moving from river to sea, while the city feeds itself and the clerks shake their heads and return to numbers that matter only until midday. When the talk shifts to winter slowdowns, lamp oil prices, rumors about the harbour master, Aldrich is already becoming a story that will not last. You work through the afternoon, pray at dusk, walk home through streets that offer no surprises because you have already taken them apart in your head. Another 10-day stretches ahead, the count begun, the weight building toward the next kill waiting in the dark. The blood is gone, the body left behind. You lock the door, let the candle burn down, eat and sleep. Morning comes. You wake in a rented room above a chandler's shop, splash water on your face, and count.